foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory that's due to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem HaKadosh. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who all in this truth from and who do well. Peace, salutations to the 144,000. The rest of the elect, unto you I say Shalom. Coming to you back with another lesson through the Spirit. Now I'm entitled this one. The watchmen are supposed to be blowing the trumpet, because the true watchmen, the true prophets of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, who everybody ignorantly calls God, and his only begotten Son, who everybody ignorantly calls Christ, they will be doing the will of what Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai commanded us to do. Ultimately, to go out there to put up these electronic pistols and feed the sheep, and not just feed the sheep, but warn them as well of the incoming danger. Because only the true prophets of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai are going to be warning the Israelites, the nation of Israel, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, of what's about to come up on the planet Earth, which is ultimately a lot of doom and gloom, a lot of calamities, a lot of plagues, pestilences, the sword, and ultimately the MOTB, the micro-Uzia. And what's going to happen, what the consequences are of taking that MOTB, which is that thermonuclear missiles hitting you, that lake of fire. But majority of the nation of Israel, these Israelites that are so calling the truth, that are not really prophesying, that aren't warning their congregation, that are doing the complete opposite, put them in that spirit of deep sleep, telling them to not worry, that everything's okay, especially these so-called Christian churches, telling their congregation that everything's okay, that, go get the bag, you should worry about prospering when this kingdom's about to be out of here. So the true prophets of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, they're going to be telling Jake, man, this kingdom's a wrap, but the kingdom of heaven is right around the corner, and ultimately only the elect are going to get it, while the rest of these false prophets are going to keep prophesying falsely to their congregation till Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai puts them to death. This is Ezekiel chapter 3 and verse 17. Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore hear the word of my mouth and give them warning for me. And that's what the true prophets of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai will be doing. We're warning Jake of the incoming doom, the incoming danger. Not telling them that there's not going to be any Jacob's trouble. The MOTB is never going to come. America's not going to be destroyed. No, we're telling them, hey, that America's about to be done away with. It's about to be hit by thermonuclear missiles. World War III is right around the corner. But these camps doing the complete opposite. The true prophets of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai are going to be warning Jake and telling them how to escape all these different plagues, ultimately hiding under the shadow of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, like it says in Psalms chapter 91. The Lord's name is a strong tower. Proverbs 18 and verse 10. It says, verse 18, when I say unto the wicked, thou shalt surely die, and thou givest him not warning, nor speakest to warn the wicked from his wicked way to save his life, the same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at thine hand. And that's what we're telling the wicked of our people, and the hopeful elect. The wicked of our people, they're not going to take heed. Because ultimately we're warning them day in and day out, like it says in Proverbs chapter 1. They're going to want to repent and take heed to that warning when it's too late. But the elect, they're going to take heed when they hear the message, when they hear that trumpet being blown by his prophets of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, while the rest of these jakes, they're not going to take heed. But ultimately we're getting that blood out of our hands. And that's what these camps aren't doing. They're not getting the blood out of their hands. They're not blowing that trumpet. They're not telling Jake, to repent and turn back to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai before all hell breaks loose. Verse 19, yet if thou warn the wicked, and he turn not from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but thou hast delivered thy soul. And this is what the true prophets of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai will be doing in these last days, is telling the wicked of our people, telling these nations, what's about to happen to them, just blowing that trumpet to the whole world. But ultimately, we're really out there for the most part, because the elect, they're almost sealed, but we still got to go out there and get the blood out of our hands. Tell Jake, about the MOTB and to not take it, and ultimately if they take heed or not, that's up to them. But really, Yahweh Shema Shai doesn't want majority of Jake to get it, but we still got to tell them. So when all these prophecies come to pass, then they're gonna remember, oh shit, I remember those guys on the street corners were telling me. Verse 20 again, when a righteous man doth turn from his righteousness and commit iniquity, and I lay a stumbling block before him, he shall die because thou hast given him not warning. He shall die in his sin, and his righteousness which he had done shall not be remembered. But his blood will I require at thine hand. And that's what these camps are doing. They're not rebuking each other. They're not telling them, you going off, you preaching the wrong doctrine. Now you're teaching that Gentiles can make it, the heathens can make it. So ultimately all these camps, yes, some are getting on each other, but for the most part, they're not really getting on each other, for debating and Hebrew rap battles and all these different gimmicks. So ultimately all these jakes that are following these congregations and their leadership, they're going to get put to death. Verse 21, nevertheless, if thou warn the righteous man that the righteous sin not, and he did not sin, he shall surely live, because he is warned. Because he is warned also, that's how delivered our souls. So this is only the elect are going to get it at the end of the day. But we still got to blow that trumpet, because ultimately it's a net being casted out. And it's going to gather, the good fish and the bad fish. But the bad fish are going to be thrown out. Some of them are, they may so-called take heed, and then they get offended. They may get offended at the grape thing, or they may get offended that only the Israelites can make it. They get offended that Esau, is going to be done away with. But not the elect. The elect aren't going to get offended at prophecy. This is Jeremiah 28 and verse 8. The prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesied both against many countries and against great kingdoms, of war and of evil and of pestilence. And that's what we're doing. We're prophesying of war, evil, pestilence. All hell's about to break loose. There's about to be a large people getting put to death. But all these other camps, they're not doing that. They're prophesying about peace, prophesying about peace and safety. I wouldn't even say prophesying. They're telling their congregation, there's going to be, because that word prophesying means to say, five before. And what they're saying is, it's not going to come to pass, because ultimately the will of Yahweh Shema Shai is going to be done on the earth regardless. And the only ones who are ushering in the kingdom of heaven, the destruction of America, Babylon the Great, the downfall of Esau, Edom, are going to be the true prophets of Yahweh Shema Shai. Not these false doctrine camps talking about heathens can make it. Verse 9, the prophet which prophesied of peace, when the word of the prophet shall come to pass, then shall the prophet be known that the Lord Yahweh Shema Shai had truly sent him. Yeah, and it is being made known, that these other camps and these Christian churches, they're false prophets, because they're not blowing the trumpet. They're telling their congregation about peace and safety. Everything's gonna be okay. But obviously, with everything that's going around the world, all these different plagues hitting the planet Earth, obviously what they're telling their congregation it isn't true. It's not coming to pass, because like Yahweh Shema Shai said, I didn't come to the earth to send peace. I came to send a sword. But only the true prophets of Yahweh Shema Shai are going to be prophesying about that sword, which is Esau, Edom. This is Ezekiel chapter 33 and verse 2. Son of man, speak to the children of the people and say unto them, when I bring the sword upon the land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast and set him for their watchman. Verse 3, if when he see the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet and warn the people. Verse 4, then whosoever heareth the sound of the trumpet and taketh not warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. So, regardless if Jake gets it or not, we still got to blow that trumpet. You know, because they may see us on the highways and byways and be like, oh man, y'all don't have nobody listening. You know, y'all only got 20 viewers on y'all live. But ultimately, majority of the cars and Jake that walks by the camp, really, majority of them are just there to get marked. You know, so really, when you think about it, from all the different people that they walk by the camp and hear the words of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai being spoken by his prophets, you know, drive by and blow the horn and roll the window down and talk shit. Majority of Jake, they're just getting marked for judgment, because there's gonna be way more Israelites. You know, 2/3. You know, here in America, that's a large number. You know, comparing to 1/3. You know, so majority of Jake is just gonna have to get put to death, because they're not meant to get it on this side. They're not gonna take heed to the warning. They're not gonna repent to Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai. Verse 5, he heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning. His blood shall be upon him. But he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. So that's that contrast between the elect and the non-elect. The non-elect, they're not going to take heed to Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai. You know, even though it is being made evident, you know, that Esau Edom's about to come down with that great sword. Only the elect are going to take heed, while the rest of these Jakes, you know, they're just going to have to get put to death. It says verse 6, but if the watchman see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. And that's these other Israelite camps. You know, the Sikaris, the Genesis, the IUICs, the ISUPKs, you know, along with the rest of these camps. You know, they're not really blowing that trumpet. You know, yeah, they got the Israelite gimmicks, you know, the paraphernalia, you know, all the Star of David and the flashy garments. But they're not really doing what Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai commanded us to do, which was ultimately to go out there and help seal the elect, to blow that trumpet, you know, to bid them to the wedding. You know, to tell them, hey, all hell's about to break loose. This is the only way out, which is Yahweh Shai. Verse 7, so thou, son of man, I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore thou shalt hear the word of my mouth and warn it from me. And that's what we're doing. You know, we're warning Jake day in and day out, constantly blowing that trumpet, you know, putting up these videos, you know, going on the highways and byways week in and week out, warning Jake. You know, but Jake, majority of Jake is just not going to take heed. You know, but we still got to go out there and warn Jake, you know, regardless if they get it or not. It says verse 8, when I say unto the wicked, O wicked man, thou shalt surely die, if thou does not speak to warn the wicked from his way. That wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at thine hand. And again, that's these other Israelite camps, because a lot of them they know the truth. You know, they know that America is going to be destroyed by thermonuclear missiles. You know, they know that the MOTB is the micro C-hip. That all hell's about to break loose. But what are they doing? You know, a lot of them ultimately sold out. You know, they lost patience. You know, they ain't want to wait on Yahweh Shai, so they just said, fuck it. You know, we're going to sell out to Esau Edom. We're going to get the 501c3. You know, since Yahweh Shai is not here, you know, because all these other Israelite camps are carnal as all hell. They can't wait for the kingdom of heaven. You know, they want the consolation now. And okay, Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai gave them their consolation on this side, but ultimately, that's going to lead to their destruction. You know, because now they're not teaching the proper doctrine. Now they're not warning Jake. Now they're not blowing the trumpet. Verse 9, nevertheless, if thou warn the wicked from his way to turn from it, if he do not turn from his way, he shall die in his iniquity, but thou hast delivered thy soul. And that's the true prophets of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai. They're going to be delivered ultimately because they did what Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai commanded them to do. You know, they ain't hide their talent, you know, under the napkin. You know, they ain't hide the candle, you know, under a hill. No, they went out there and did the will of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai and blew that trumpet and helped seal the elect, and also warned the wicked Jake what's about to come up on the planet Earth. But only the true prophets of Yahweh Ba'Shem Shai will be doing that. While the rest of these false Israelite camps and these Christian churches, they're just going to be through out. They're going to get put to death. A lot of them are going to get judged, in front of a large amount of people, to show Israel what happens when you don't